afternoon, all of you. We're back to hear a wonderful story about an old timer here. I believe she's seventh generation in Whatcom County. There aren't very many people in Whatcom County that have been here 7 generations, so including me. I'm only the fifth generation, so this is a special occasion. Her name is Fern Postlewait. She was married to Fern Jordan, and she worked at the bank here in town forever. We all know Fern the Teller. So she's going to tell us a story about her grandparents coming here and all of the people that have lived here in her family. Fern, take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to introduce my grandparents. And
let me hold that for you. You
this
talk about
is Nancy Jane Lynn Brown, and she was deceased in 1945. My grandpa is Ezariah David Brown. He was deceased in 1928, and this picture is taken on their farm on the Brown Road off of South Pass. It's currently called Tree Farm. Westergreens have it now, the road. But it was the Brown Road, and that are my great-grandparents. I'd like to give you a little bit of history about my grandparents. Ezariah David, he liked to be called David, was born in Ohio, and in 1846, passed away in 1928 at their home on South Pass Road. He married my grandmother, Nancy Jane Lynn, and she was born in Iowa in 1858. She passed away March 27 in 1945. So I got to know my great-grandmother quite well. I was a senior in high school when she passed away. My mother was the oldest granddaughter, and I was the oldest great. So I did get spoiled. I did get some of her things that she wanted to give away and share with me. My grandma and grandpa, as a child, my grandmother grew up in Iowa, and her parents would leave her in charge of the younger children when they went shopping or something or went to visit the neighbors. And her father told her never to be afraid of the Indians, as he was their friend. She said she was frightened when they would come and look in the window, but if her parents were gone, they would leave and not bother her. After her marriage to Ezariah David in Missouri, they left with a team of oxen and a covered wagon for Kansas. They later made a trip back to Missouri and back to Kansas with a covered wagon and oxen. They settled northeast of Ransom, Kansas, Ness County. The farm had a creek running through it, and Grandpa, or David as he was called, raised horses to sell. They also had cows, a large garden, an orchard, and chickens. Nancy Jane made a trip to Ransom, and that happens to be the town that I was born in, once a week with a wagon and a team of oxen to sell vegetables, eggs, and creams to the stores in Ransom. The house that they lived in there had 2 stories and was made of limestone rocks. All her children were born there, and David delivered all of them with no doctor or midwife. My 2 aunts, great aunts, operated a telephone office in Kansas. In 1910, they came out here on a migrant train, bringing my grandma, Viola, and my mother, 1 year old, with them. They talked of the long train ride. The train stopped in Salt Lake City for a brief time. They bought 140 acres off of South Pass Road. They had a log house across a creek from Sugarloaf. That was a small hill that I had went up many times, because being from Kansas, if you could climb a mountain or a little hill, it was really an accomplishment and something you enjoyed, because you could look down and see whatever you wanted to see. We didn't have those in Kansas. The house that Grandma and Grandpa had was a log house It had 2 rooms downstairs and 2 rooms upstairs with a large porch area across the back. Water was piped into the kitchen from a spring. The wood-cook stove had a reservoir on one side, which Grandma used for washing and other things. It was like hot water, except no tank. It was attached to the stove. The living room had an organ, lace curtains, and in the summer they moved the wood heater outside in a shed, and they spread a hand-loomed rag rug that was made in long strips from wall to wall. Grandma Kendall said that when they were children, in their spare time, they spent time cutting and sewing all the spare cloth into strips for the rug. They shipped it to Washington when they came. Nancy, my great-grandmother, was a very good seamstress. She made all of David, her husband's clothes, until he died. She also did knitting, crocheting, embroidering, making most of her own patterns. My grandpa came out here later. He worked in the woods. My great-uncles worked in the woods. I have logging pictures that I will show you. My grandma and grandpa had 10 children, 4 of which died, 3 girls and a boy, from probably smallpox when they were quite young. They had 6 living adults, all born in Kansas, 4 boys and 2 girls. One daughter, my great-aunt, passed away 2 weeks after giving birth to her son, her first son. And from there on, they lived on the farm. And I have a picture of my great-grandma, my great-grandpa, and their daughter.
Jim, could you bring it back over again? I didn't get a shot of it. Bring the picture back over. Just hold it up a little bit, so. All right, thank you.
And they, from the looks of the picture and the piece of machinery my uncle was holding that was a big size, they were making hay. This is where my great-grandparents lived. My great-grandmother belonged to a club. It was called South Pass Get-Together Club. And I have a little poem or saying that was written by Mrs. Bill Frost. It was given to my grandmother in the spring of 1935, and I'll read it and then pass it around. Back in the woods, in a pretty little spot, there lives a dear little lady whom we all love a lot. She is always bright and cheerful, has a smile for everyone. We all just love to go there. We think it's lots of fun. She makes so many pretty things. She's really very clever. The thing she cannot make is not worth mentioning ever. So here we've come on March the 4th to help you celebrate. And here we hope we'll all be back next year on the same date. That was Grandma's birthday. And the significance of the straw flowers are, my grandmother loved them too. And if she was given a box of chocolates at Valentine's Day that was a heart, she would take the straw flowers and line the box with different colors of the straw flowers and cover it and hang them on the wall and give them to people for gifts. I also have my great-grandmother's recipe for liniment, of all things. It contained orgamenon or something oil, 2 ounces, ammonia, 1 ounce, opium, a ½ ounce, tincture of iodine, a 1/4 ounce, pike oil, 1 ounce, alcohol, a pint. And it was probably good for whatever ailed her.
We might point out that opium was over the counter in those days. So was morphine.
And my grandmother could do Well, she did all sorts of fancy work as well as making clothes for her husband. And this is a pillow top that I'll pass around with all the fancy stitches that she made on it. She used everything she could to make something.
Very nice.
My mother was the oldest granddaughter, and she had these loving uncles. And here's a Valentine card they gave her at Valentine's Day, with love to the dearest little girl I know. And being an only child, my grandmother helped instill in me what you can learn from reading and the love of reading books. And she gave me books at an early age. She gave me this book, which is signed by her in 1940, and it's called A Garland for Girls by Louisa M. Alcott. And this one is The Hidden Staircase by Carolyn King, and I think Grandma signed it. From Grandma Brown to Fern, 1941. She instilled in me the love of books.
So you had your own library then, early on.
Yes.
Very good.
My grandmother loved to cook also as well as sew. And while she was cooking, this is one of the aprons that she wore that she made herself. And I can pass that around. It's got some of her fancy work on it, and it shows what they look like. They completely covered your clothes.
Went clear around.
There's no danger of
You
getting
wipe your hands on that one without any
Yes.
trouble at all. It's kind of,
My grandmother ordered the scrub board from Montgomery Ward's. It has her name and address on the back, and I'm sure she wore many a knuckle red on it.
did you ever use this?
Could be. If I did, I was a little girl, but that was my great-grandmother's.
That's in very good condition. Very nice.
And like I say, being the oldest great-grandchild, my grandmother gave me lots of treasures. She gave me this picture, which I've always loved all my life, and to me it means a little girl running down the hill to greet her daddy coming home from work.
And how old were you when you got the picture? Do you remember?
When I came out from Kansas and from Kansas to here, I came with my grandmother,
Uh-huh.
my mother's mother, my grandmother, my aunt, who was 9 years older than me, my mom and dad, myself, and I was going to be 7 that summer. But that little, I don't know who that little girl is, but I've loved her all my
But
life.
you had this before you left, or you got that
My
out here?
great-grandmother gave it to me when I came here.
Ah. So you're about 7, so you've had this a long...
I was about 7 years old, so I have had that picture 81 years. My grandmother loved beautiful things, and she had a lot of calendars on her walls, which were very beautiful. And this is from the Montana Black Shop from Sunas, and the calendar is 1911, a full starting with January.
Oh, that's pretty.
Fern, I found a photo in the book.
Yeah. There's a photo in the book to you.
Yes. Oh,
Is that,
I'll take it.
that's myself, my great grandmother, and 2 of my cousins. Could go back.
beautiful. Very well.
I have a couple of Kinsey photos, logging photos, and this one is taken from Glacier Logging Company, and it has my relatives in it, my great uncles, and one of them is up on the spar tree.
That's way up there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's it.
This photo is another Kinsey photo, and I'm not sure the location, but it could be near my grandparents. There was a mill near their place. They have all of the photos laying out here so that whoever wanted to purchase one can purchase one. I think they were like $1 or $1.50 each. He bought these at that time. And I have a great uncle here, great uncle there, another great uncle, and a great uncle there.
So, they weren't loggers in Kansas, were they?
They were all born in Kansas.
I bet they weren't loggers there.
No, they weren't. They were farmers.
My wife's family were all loggers in Norway before they got here. That would be difficult to identify. The place, location.
It could have been near my
course, it would have a pit.
grandparents. If anyone isn't familiar at all with Reese Hill Road going out of Sumas on the way up to Mount Baker, there's a great big rock alongside the road. And I don't know who started the story, whether it was my relatives, the Browns, or my parents when they came out here. But it was sort of a joke. As soon as you got to the rock, my dad would say, "Oh boy, feel that air, smell the difference? Everybody's feeling better." They're at the rock. Hey, I have photo albums full of these postcards. They tell the history of my family, and this one in particular is written from my great uncle to his mother. And it says, "Dear Mother, girl arrived, the 6th. All is well. I'm going back to work today. Well, bye-bye, Milo." And that was my great uncle. He's announcing the birth of the baby girl.
Are you the baby girl?
Nope. That was my great uncle. And this one is on trail at Mount Baker, and it's written to my grandmother from my great uncle, the same one. He's saying, "Dear Mother, I thought I would send you a card to let you know I'm all right and working. Every day will come home next Sunday if I don't have to work. Well, goodbye." And they did that. They communicated all the time in this form.
And this, it's written to Sumas, and he was in Glacier.
He was in Glacier working.
So you wrote to each other. You didn't get on the telephone. If you were in Glacier, you wrote to people in Sumas.
This is a friend of my grandmother's home, and the person on the back said, "I couldn't get all of the house, but you can see the flowers." They all love flowers. This postcard is kind of special because my son's great-grandmother was a receiver of it, and Wayne has a friend who wrote the postcard and was telling about Oliver going to school, starting to school, Oliver Dieter from the South Pass Road. And Wayne happens to know the son of the great-grandson on the Dieter side. So this is special. It all comes back.
Take it from the top of Moe's Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
probably many of you have seen, I don't know if any of you have seen the old picture of the South Pass School.
South Pass School. No, I haven't seen that one.
Hold it up a little bit, Jim.
Yeah.
This is the South Pass School, which is in the little valley where the Westerings live.
So,
Right in the valley, when you come off the hill and go back down through the little valley and on up that little valley in there. That's where the South Pass School sat.
so a person could take his own photographs and make them into postcards?
Yes.
Apparently so. I didn't know that.
My grandmother, my mother's mother, was also a photographer, and she did that for a business in Kansas. She took
Oh,
photographs. I have pictures of a lot of people's homes that resided in Ransom, Kansas, because my grandmother was a photographer and also developed her own pictures.
Oh.
So I have an idea that maybe she did some of these. Here's one of my grandfather and my great uncle out in the woods with a good sized tree.
Yeah.
So hold that up, Jim.
Penny postcard.
Western red cedar.
This is one of my great uncles along the railroad tracks, and I'd like to tell the story about how my grandparents got to Sumas. The train went right at the back of their property, up and down. However, on the way down, it would stop and pick them up because it was going downhill. But on the way back up, it would not stop because it was uphill and they wouldn't get started again. So they all had to toss the packages off and jump with my mother, who was a little girl. They all had to jump off the train or the train wouldn't start. I had it started. So that was a story of how they got back and forth.
That's the section of railroad that we know as the limestone quarry road. The Milwaukee Road ran up to Sumas, and then it went up the hill to Glacier. And it's on the uphill going up Reese Hill, where their homestead was. Near the top of Reese, well, actually at the top of Reese Hill. At the top of Reese Hill is where their homestead was, and the tracks went right through there.
But actually, the road went from South Pass, but you could get there if you walked the tracks and cut through.
Was the Reese Hill Road there? I don't remember when the Reese Hill Road was put in.
It was there then.
Yeah.
There's a
I know
story.
you can't get from the Reese Hill Road over to your place because of the deep ravine in between that the railroad track went up.
Yes,
So there was no roads coming from the Reese Hill to your place.
years ago.
No.
The road, yeah, years
Was it?
ago there was, because the bridge that is on the Frost Road was put in the 1800s.
Ah,
And there's a story about one of my great uncles. He was a loner. He was in the First World War, and perhaps he had seen a few many things over there, but he was just his own self. And he would go to Eastern Washington, pick hops and pick crops and etc. He never married. And there's a story that once he was told Grandma he was going to Sumas, Grandma said, well, take the kerosene lamp and get some oil, get some kerosene. He didn't come back with the kerosene for a year. But be it true or not, it's probably true. So I have, does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me about my grandparents and the farm? I think that what my grandparents did, because I don't really know for sure, they perhaps farmed there because in one of the postcards, it's like a history. If I read these, it's like learning the history of everything that's written on them. My grandmother had eggs and butter, and one of the boys wrote from Glacier saying, Mother, would you please save your eggs and butter because we're running out, and I'll try to be down this weekend to get some. So they farmed on the farm and had cows and hay and worked the farm, and the boys worked in the woods and did that type. Yes?
I try and create in my mind a picture of exactly where this farm was.
Okay.
At today's,
Okay, in
at
today's
where
world,
would that farm be located?
in today's world, it's part of Cedar Springs Retreat.
Which is,
It's It's accessible from the Monica Road.
Right. Minecker Road runs straight into it. It's east of the end of the Minecker Road.
And at the time that my grandparents lived there, there was a road there that went back to my grandparents' home from the South Pass. And there were other people that lived there. The Grahams lived there. Charlie Graham was the father, and Lloyd Graham was the son. They had two children, Charlie and Bessie. And Bessie Graham married Hadeen, and I knew them all my life. But they lived back there, and I remember another lady that we always called Grandma Baker lived back that road. So there were a few other people that lived back the Brown Road at that time.
now where is the Monica Road?
It's off of North Pass.
It's off the Dieter Road.
Off the
Yeah.
Off
Cedar
North
Road.
Pass.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I was born and raised up on the South Pass, North Pass area, so.
It's about a mile and a half north of the South Pass and parallels the South Pass.
Uh-huh,
But you come to it off the Dieter Road.
yeah.
Of course, my grandparents never had electricity because it was too far back and too non-affordable. I have various different pictures. If you promise to give them back, I'll pass around of the area of the woods of the mill. There was a mill alongside the railroad track
Still have the railroad,
that
still there.
there was a skid road up to my great-grandparents that I used to walk many times and go up there to my grandparents' house on the skid road, what they called a skid road at that time. And
All you know what a skid road is? It's a bunch of logs laid parallel
mhm.
to the road, or, across the road, that they used to skid the logs on. So the logs didn't dig into the ground. They slid on top of the thing. And they usually had a grease monkey that goes along with bear grease or whatever it is and greased the logs so that the log would slide on it without burning up the log or the skids. But they call it a skid road.
This picture shows my mother, and I believe she's holding her cousin as a baby, and a little settlement which was part of the mill.
Hold that up, Jim.
And this is another mill picture. We can
Yep.
pass those together.
Yep.
This is
Excuse me.
another mill.
All right.
How did you get your mail?
Walked out to the end of the Brown Road.
Oh, they delivered to the end of the Brown.
Mhm.
So you walked about a half mile to get your mail.
Further than that. It was probably a mile and a half.
That was it. That was after you had rural, but before
Oh.
they had, when they got it originally, did they walk to Sumas to get it? When they first moved there in 1989, there was no rural delivery then.
The train, I imagine.
Oh, they got it from the train. Good point. Yeah, they probably made a drop.
When my parents and I came out here when I was a small child, we all lived with my great grandmother. There was my mom and dad, myself, my grandmother, and my aunt, who was 9 years older than I am. And I guess my dad, he loved to talk and he got acquainted with everyone. And someone told him about a place, 40 acres with a little house on it. So my dad purchased that for probably $250. And it was like a 2-room house, which he bought it, he added on to, and we lived there for a number of years. So shortly, as soon as we could, upon moving from Kansas to Grandma Brown's place, we moved on our own,
Where was that? 40 acres.
off Reese Hill Road.
Oh, it's up on top of the hill too.
No, yes.
Near the Frost Road then, or that far down, or
It's before you get to the Frost Road down.
it's up
Reese
on
Hill.
top of the hill, just beyond.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that was way back in the woods. and I walked to the bus by myself every morning. And if I thought I missed the bus, I walked to school because I didn't have a watch. So I'd sit there and wait for the bus, not knowing what time it was, and so, oh boy, maybe I missed it. So I would walk all the way to Columbia Valley Grade School by myself. I wasn't afraid of the bears or whatever, but I never
Columbia
saw
Valley
any.
Grade School was in the Nooksack district then, or in the Mount Baker?
It was in the Mount Baker district, but the
Okay.
year I graduated from grade school, it consolidated. Half my class went to Baker, and I was in the half that went to Nooksack. And these are various different pictures of my grandma's house and other things that might be of interest to you. She lived in a log house, and I do also.
Is this one of your houses?
That's her house.
Ah, mortise and tin, didn't it? It squared off those logs.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. When you're hiking up at Cedar Springs, there's a sign that says Old Homestead.
Mm-hmm.
So the remains that are there, was that part of your grandparents?
Yes. They had a barn, and they had a bunkhouse, and then the house.
It's mostly just a pile of stone, isn't it? From the fireplace? Excuse me?
Yeah, I don't think there's much wood stuff
Yeah.
left anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty much.
Yeah.
I think it burnt too, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been up there for quite a while.
Well, Mom, on your property, Grandpa logged, and there was a mill site on your property where you're at now.
Where I am now.
Yeah, that Grandpa had,
Mm-hmm.
and a siding.
So you moved down off the hill after you got married then?
No, the first home I had with my children's husband was on Resale Road.
Ah,
And we lived there for a while. Then we moved to Bellingham. Then we moved to Oregon for a short time, came back to Bellingham. And my kids ended up going to Meridian School District.
so
But I'm back there again.
Did you know the Nicolay family?
The which family?
Nicolay,
Yes,
you did.
I know that name.
I need to talk to you about that.
Mm-hmm.
They contacted me looking for information about the area.
I think I saw something about that in the paper once, wanting information.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about making a fire.
I used to walk the railroad track from my mom and dad's place through the woods to Grandma Brown's. Never had a fear.
you knew when the train was going to run.
I guess so.
A lot of that's on
There were-
a lot of it's on trestles. So
There were a lot of trestles, yes.
So if you were caught with a train on a trestle, you had to figure another way off.
Mm-hmm.
So, did your dad farm then? Whenever he on the 40 acres? Did
My father?
Your father?
No. He logged.
He worked in the
Logged
woods.
yes, he logged the trees and he had chickens and geese and ducks and a horse and a few things like that, but he did not make his living there as a farmer.
Was it properly treed when you moved on? Or did you have to clear it?
No, the trees, there was a meadow, we always called the meadow, that was a big hay field.
Mhm.
It was already cleared, basically, when we moved to that.
But your grandfather's place had to be cleared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of those pictures that are being passed around were great-grandma and grandpa Brown's place with the trees and the fellows sitting there working. And their house, I'm sure, came from the trees on the place, and the barn material also from the mill. They probably took the trees down to the mill and built from their own lumber from the place.
Fern, I have a question. So, your great grandparents came to this region to file a donation claim or a homestead claim, or did they have word of this in Kansas from some other source? I mean, how did they get here?
You know, why did they pick this particular? I don't know for sure, but
Right.
I do know that there was a connection with my great grandmother and the family and the Campbells, and the Campbells lived in Skagit County, and one of my great uncles married a Campbell, and so whether they corresponded back and forth, and the Campbells told him how great it was out here, so they decided they'd try it. That's what I sort of pieced together.
You know, even with my group, I've always been so curious why people would pick such a remote, somewhat obscure area coming from many states away, countries. I mean, my people came, you know, from Scotland to Perth, Ontario, and down here, and from Norway to Wisconsin to here. And I'm thinking, holy cow, how did they ever find this place, you know?
I think they came together, the connection. The Campbells were here already.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
By that time, a lot of people were communicating what kind of country we had out here, and
Right.
you know, even when we came in '83, there was we came because we had relatives already here the year before, so they wrote back and said what good land we had here, and in Minnesota we were having trouble with the railroads and their easements, so we got on the first train west and settled out here.
When we came out in the summer that I was turning 7, I had dust pneumonia. We were in the middle of the Depression as well as the dust storms. And I very much remember the dust storms that we were in, the preparation my family made to try to make it better. And of course, our living conditions weren't, we were poor. We didn't have a lot of money, so we had to do what we could to try to make things better when there was a crisis such as a dust storm coming. And when we came out here, I had dust pneumonia and was spitting up blood. And prior to that, Mother told Dad that we had to get out of there for our health. And Dad said, well, we'll go to Missouri. And Mother said, we're not going to Missouri. We're going to Washington State where Grandma is, because she had been here as a child. Mother went back and forth from here with her mother and her parents. She didn't start first grade till she was 8 years old, because she was living here and going back and forth with her mother and father from here to Kansas. And Mother told Dad, she said, no, we're not going to Missouri. So that's how we ended up here, my family. And I am the 4th generation down from my great-grandmother and grandfather Brown, and I have 3 below me. I have my children, Wayne, who is here, my granddaughter Amy is here, and my great-grandson, my first one, Austin. So the 3 below me are being represented here today.
Good.
So I'm quite proud that we are 7 generations, including my grandmother.
One of the reasons people settled up on these hills, there was still homestead land available up there that hadn't been homesteaded yet. So some of the people who came a little later, homesteaded into the hills where they could still get free land, whereas most of the bottom land had been homesteaded years before. And it was harder proving up in the hills. And Gus Westergreen was the examiner, and he was already the king of the mountain, and he didn't necessarily want people up there that weren't going to be good neighbors.
So
Anything else you need to?
no. Anyway, if anyone has any questions or anything,
Oh,
There's a
my,
question
I have a
here.
question. This cabin with all the songs in front of it, is that also a residence? People lived in that?
yeah,
Yeah, the stovepipe is what told me that. I mean,
they
assumed
lived
that-
there when they were away from home.
yeah,
Shanties.
I see.
That's more in keeping with the original Indian housing, which was vertical slabs. they put up a pole frame, and then they put split cedar slabs up against it, and then just leaned them against the wall. So
I see.
lots of air circulation
Mm-hmm.
because they had their fire on the inside, but they didn't use stovepipes. They just used an open fire.
Wooden teepee.
So they needed someplace for the smoke to go. But that you're very observant to notice a stovepipe coming out of a shed. But a lot of people lived pretty primitive. Some of the bachelors lived in stumps because our old burnt out cedar stumps were had maybe 8-10 foot space in between. They just put a roof on it and they had a house.
Stump. Sure.
So, and the roof could easily be made out of the pieces of the cedar tree just by using a pro and splitting your own shakes and putting up a wood frame or a pole frame and then putting the shakes on top, and you had it for, you could probably put one up in a couple of days.
And you had a dirt floor.
Then you're right. And then you started farming, and then you built a shed, and then you went to a house.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my great uncle saying the problem he had, the reason he lived on the second story and kept the first story unoccupied is because said he could always defend a stairwell with his guns, but he couldn't defend all four walls against bear and cougar and things like that were roaming around. And he was a bachelor, quarter mile away from anybody else, and so he wanted to be able to live through any encounter. He said when the bear would rub their bodies against the corner of his shed to scratch, the whole building would move. So when he built his newer house out of frame and sawn lumber, he built his living quarters upstairs with a stairwell coming up because he knew he could defend that.
My great uncles, one of them settled in Burlington and lived there most of his years. After his wife passed away, he did come back, and after Grandma was gone, he lived in the home place. Two of my great uncles lived in California, and I knew one of them real well, and had been to his place in Hemet, California. He worked for the city of Hemet with the water department and retired from there. So some of them moved on and some stayed.
Is anything from the original homestead still there? Or?
Well, Betty would know a little bit.
I haven't been up there for a long time, but I think it's just mostly like rocks and maybe like a
Wayne
cement,
has
part
been
of a
up
The
there.
cement
buildings are
frame.
all rotted out. Yeah.
The house
in this
burned.
country, if you don't keep them up, they rot out pretty fast.
It burnt.
Oh, it burned.
Mm-hmm.
When I was
The
there,
barn and everything, huh?
There's Wayne has been there.
yeah, when I was there, all I could really see was a pile of rubbish and rock from their fireplace. That's about all there's there. There was one little shed. The roof was down to the ground.
Yeah. Well, I've run across some houses in the woods up there, and I was wondering whose houses they were because I couldn't identify from where once you get in the woods, you lose kind of sight of where you are.
Yeah.
So I didn't know whose houses they were.
So, with a local family cemetery, or where's most of the family buried?
My family, my great grandmother and grandmother are buried at Sumas, as well as my grandmother, my mom's mother, and my uncle Charlie is buried there, and there's Grandma and Grandpa, Aunt Ida, Uncle Charlie, Grandma Kendall, my mother. They're all at Sumas.
None of them buried in Kendall.
Pardon?
None of them are buried in Columbia Valley by the Catholic Church.
No, not my family.
Yeah. There was another cemetery not too far away up at Columbia Valley, but that was a Catholic cemetery.
Catholic. And my mother married Frank Kendall, but no relation to the Kendalls here.
Oh.
They're from back Midwest also.
So, when did you leave the area?
Was
when
it,
did you leave, when you got married and moved on, when did that happen? When did you leave the homestead
when
area?
did I leave?
When you move off the hill.
Well, I didn't leave when I got off the hill. I mean, when I graduated from high school and everything, I married the kid's father, and we lived on Reese Hill. The first house that we purchased was on Reese Hill.
But
we
when
purchased-
did you come down off that? When you said you went to Oregon for a while.
Yes, we went, but that was a while into the marriage, and we lived on Reese Hill. Then we lived in Sumas briefly, my family, my immediate family. We moved to Bellingham. We bought a home in Bellingham. My kids went to school at Sunnyland. And then, like I say, they graduated from Meridian. I started, the time that we were living in Oregon, I started working for U.S. National Bank in Coos Bay, Oregon. And their father was working, they started a new mill down there, Georgia Pacific. So he went down there to relocate because it had closed here. And then we stayed there, moved back up here, and eventually I went to work for a Northwestern Commercial Bank. I worked then for National Bank of Commerce in Bellingham, which changed to Rainier Security Pacific. I transferred from Bellingham to Everson. I worked almost every aspect in banking, except I never made loans. I knew how to receive the money, but I never made loans. I knew how to do it, but I didn't, to do the paperwork, but I never physically made loans. I did learn posting the general ledger, which we did by machine at that time. If the power went off when I was first working, so be it. We used Danny machines and batched our work, what we call batched. And when I was in Everson, I was promoted to an officer. And from Everson, I transferred to Linden and worked there till I retired. I was in charge of operations and personnel in Linden. After I retired, I didn't really retire. I worked in every county bank as an auditor. I loved figures and doing things like that. So I would come to Everson, pull out their monthly audits and start their audits. I would do auditing in Linden, Bellingham. The first year I retired, they didn't have an operations officer. So I went up there and worked most of the summer being their operations officer in Blaine. It was difficult for me to retire because I'd worked so many years. So it took me a while to phase out. And that's one reason I probably like doing auditing and traveling to the different banks. And then one job I had with another one of my co-workers, we were both retired. We took the job in Bellingham of doing night bags. And we were locked in a room. We could get out, but nobody could get in. All day long on Mondays doing nothing but night bags. We worked very hard trying to complete the night bags, and there was many a Monday that we could not finish them. There were so many. So that's what I did.
Busy woman. A very busy woman. So you are retired now, though?
I'm retired.
No more audits?
No more audits. I had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. I have 2 living boys. I have 8 grandchildren and 10 great.
Are most of them around here?
1 son's here, 1 granddaughter's here, and 1 great-grandson is here.
Are they living in Everson?
Today.
Are they living in Everson area?
Wayne lives not far from me, my son. Amy and Austin live in Bellingham.
Local. Still local.
Mm-hmm.
And you're back up the hill, right?
I'm back up the hill. I've been, after I was living on a 10-mile road. My husband deceased. He and I owned property with my parents on the Frost Road. And so Dean and I decided to build a house there. He has passed away. I'm still there. I won't leave. I love it. It's by a stream. And what could be more peaceful and beautiful?
It is very beautiful.
And the fire didn't get to you?
Pardon?
The fire they just had up there didn't get to you?
No.
That was on the north side of the road, wasn't it?
It was
up on the dike?
It was northeast of me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
They had a big fire up there. Lightning started, wasn't it?
It was started by a tree fell over a power line
That's
from
right.
Bonneville.
Tree fell on the power line north of her place, and it caught the woods on fire.
Oh,
That was my great grandma's property.
Ah,
Long time. Grandma Kendall lived
Mhm.
there.
ah.
That was a different grandmother.
Well, I remember once seeing that whole dike on fire. The whole north side of the dike was ablaze, and I'll tell you that was a scary thing.
The
Mhm.
dike.
Didn't get over the hill on your side, on the other side, Reese Hill side, but boy, if I was living on the Reese Hill side, I'd been really nervous.
Vedder
They were
Mountain there.
evacuating that year,
Yeah,
and my mom and dad lived on the side of the mountain. A lot of the people that lived on Better Mountain were bringing their things down to my parents.
yeah.
What year
Well-
was that?
Hmm?
What year was that?
Long time ago,
About 85.
35 years ago.
85.
I think
Okay,
something about there.
I got
Yeah,
pictures of it.
it was. When you get old, time is very relative. Although my wife tells me you got to be 95 before you're old. I'm not 95 yet, so she reached that. So when she got to be 95, she said suddenly she decided she was an old lady. So, well, I think we'll call that a break.
Okay.